Title: We can't control the aircraft. S7 Airlines Flight 5220. The roar of the engines grew louder as S7 Airlines Flight 5220 taxied down the runway at Moscow's Domodedovo Airport. A cold January wind howled outside, rattling the windows of the terminal. Inside the cockpit, Captain Igor Mikhailov and First Officer Elena Petrov sat in tense silence, performing their pre-flight checks. It was routine, yet something felt off. Igor, a veteran pilot with over 2 decades of experience, furrowed his brow at the faint flicker of an indicator light on the overhead panel. "Elena, did you see that?" Igor asked, his voice calm but tinged with unease. Elena, a young but exceptionally skilled first officer, glanced at the panel. The light had stopped flickering, now glowing steady green. She shook her head. "Looks fine now." "Could have been a glitch," she replied, but her voice betrayed her nerves. In the passenger cabin, 183 travelers, including families, business people, and solo adventurers, settled in for the 4-hour flight to Novosibirsk. Among them was Alexei, a nervous first-time flyer gripping the armrest, his wife Marina trying to reassure him. Across the aisle, a young girl named Sophia sat with her grandmother, clutching a stuffed bear, her wide eyes watching the flight attendants buckle in for takeoff. The engines roared to life, and the aircraft surged forward. As the wheels lifted off the ground, a sudden jolt rocked the plane. Passengers gasped, some gripping their seats tightly. In the cockpit, Igor and Elena exchanged sharp glances. "Did you feel that?" Igor asked, his voice steady but wary. Elena nodded, her hands firm on the controls. It wasn't turbulence. The plane climbed steadily into the sky, but the sense of unease lingered. As they reached cruising altitude, Igor's unease deepened. Something wasn't right. 30 minutes into the flight, Elena noticed something unusual on her display. "Captain, the autopilot system is lagging. It's not responding like it should." Igor leaned over to check. His eyes narrowed. "Switch it off. Let's go manual for now." Elena complied, but the manual controls felt sluggish. Igor gripped the yoke, testing the responsiveness. The plane obeyed, but there was resistance, like steering through thick mud. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Check with the engineers," he ordered. Elena contacted ground control, her voice calm but urgent. "Moscow, this is S7 Airlines Flight 5220. We're experiencing irregularities with the control systems. Please advise." Back in the cabin, the atmosphere was calm, on the surface. Marina noticed Alexei's hands trembling and squeezed his arm. "It's just your nerves," she whispered. But Alexei wasn't convinced. He glanced out the window and noticed the plane banking slightly to the left. It felt unnatural. In the cockpit, things were escalating. The control system was no longer responding consistently. "We're losing control," Igor muttered under his breath. Elena glanced at him, her usually confident demeanor shaken. Suddenly, an alarm blared. The cockpit filled with flashing red lights as a warning message appeared on their screens: hydraulic system failure. The failure of the hydraulic system meant one terrifying reality: the pilots had almost no control over the plane's movements. Igor grabbed the radio. "Mayday, Mayday. This is S7 Airlines Flight 5220. We've experienced a major hydraulic failure. Request immediate assistance." The ground controller's voice crackled back. "S75220, we are tracking your flight. Attempt emergency descent to 20,000 feet. Can you confirm control of the aircraft?" Igor's hands trembled as he gripped the yoke. "We're barely holding it together." The passengers sensed something was wrong. The plane began to shudder violently, tilting unnaturally to one side. Alexei tightened his seatbelt, his face pale. Sophia started to cry, clutching her bear. The flight attendants tried to remain calm, moving quickly to reassure passengers, but fear was spreading like wildfire. In the cockpit, Igor and Elena fought against the unresponsive controls. The plane began to descend rapidly, the nose dipping dangerously. "Pull up," Igor shouted, his voice raw with desperation. "I'm trying," Elena replied, her hands white-knuckled on the controls. Despite the chaos, Elena's sharp mind was racing. Igor, what if we reroute power to the secondary systems? It's risky, but it might give us limited control. Igor hesitated. If we fail, we'll lose everything. We don't have a choice, Elena insisted, her voice resolute. Igor nodded. Do it. Elena's fingers flew over the controls, rerouting power. For a brief moment, the alarm ceased and the plane stabilized. Relief swept through the cockpit, but it was short-lived. The rerouted system couldn't handle the strain and began to fail. Brace for impact, Igor whispered, his voice heavy with resignation. The ground loomed closer as the plane descended uncontrollably. Igor and Elena worked in tandem, using every ounce of their skill to guide the aircraft away from populated areas. In the cabin, passengers held hands, whispered prayers, and clung to their loved ones. Suddenly, Igor spotted a frozen lake ahead. It was their best chance for a crash landing. Elena, aim for the lake, he shouted. With painstaking effort, they managed to align the plane. The landing gear deployed, but it wasn't enough. The plane skidded across the icy surface, the sound of tearing metal deafening. Sparks flew as the aircraft came to a grinding halt, the nose partially submerged in ice. For a moment, there was silence. Then, screams and cries erupted as passengers scrambled to evacuate. The flight attendants, despite their own terror, worked quickly to open the emergency exits. Alexei, frozen in fear, was pulled to his feet by Marina. Sophia's grandmother shielded her as they slid down the inflatable slide into the frigid air. In the cockpit, Igor and Elena ensured everyone was evacuated before exiting themselves. They stood together on the icy surface, trembling but alive, watching as passengers huddled together, grateful to be breathing. Rescue teams arrived within minutes, ferrying passengers to safety. News of the miraculous crash landing spread quickly, hailing Igor and Elena as heroes. Despite the failure of technology, their skill and determination had saved 183 lives. Alexei, once terrified of flying, found a new appreciation for the fragility and resilience of life. Sophia, clutching her bear, smiled shyly at the pilots who had saved her. And Igor and Elena, though haunted by the experience, knew they had done everything possible to defy the odds. Flight 5220 would forever be remembered, not as a tragedy, but as a testament to human courage in the face of the unimaginable.